Muli Shaniwanse, welcome and welcome back to my channel. My name is Thembi Fletcher if it's your first time here, and I make eclectic videos. And today's video is a really fun one. This one is definitely very new for me, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be quite new and intriguing for a good number of you. And we are going to be talking about the dramatic classic KIBBE body type. Make sure you like this video and also subscribe if you haven't already done so, and let's jump right in. And for your information, I am going to be reading an article from ourfashiongarden.com as usual, or per usual, because they just have a really extensive way of describing these body types. And so let's go ahead and begin. Dramatic classics are mainly classics, balanced yin and yang, with yang bone structure. They have an angular frame with classic body flesh and facial features. They can also have a balanced, moderate body structure with yang flesh or facial features. On women, the body can have an hourglass silhouette, and in men, it looks like an inverted triangle. So we're not looking at men in this video. I might do that in the future, who knows? But let's look at what they look like when gaining weight. When gaining weight, they collect it in their hips and thighs, rarely on the bust line. When gaining weight, it can be very obvious with dramatic classics. Their body shape transforms into a pear shape the more weight they gain. So that's quite interesting. And then let's go ahead and look at some of the characteristics of the dramatic classic. You're going to have moderate height, but you can be slightly on the taller side as well. So this is very true. You can look a little muscular in your ideal weight. So I have noticed that quite a few dramatic classics do have a certain level of musculature in their flesh when they are really lean or slender or slim, and so that is quite interesting as well. Your legs and arms tend to be longer, but not necessarily so. You're going to have tapered shoulders and which are somewhat square, but they're going to be narrow. So I think in comparison to the soft dramatic, which I'm going to definitely be doing in this video, soft dramatics do have tapered shoulders for the most part, which are somewhat square as well. But I kind of feel like soft dramatics do look a little bit broader than a dramatic classic would, and so you get to see that soon. You're also going to have a sharp or square face. Yes, that is so true with dramatic classics. And then you're going to have moderate blended yin-yang facial features, a small waist in proportion to bust and hips, and your silhouette can look straight if you're too skinny. So this is one of the body types that I kind of feel changes a lot depending on their size. And I kind of feel like that's really cool, because someone might look at you, you can look really skinny and slender when you lose a lot of weight and look quite straight. So I feel like a lot of dramatic classics can pull off a lot more dramatic type of looks, so to speak, like pantsuits and stuff like that, especially when they're really skinny, because their frames can handle those types of lines. But then as you gain weight, you're going to shift to more feminine type of styles. So let's say something that has a little bit of sharpness, but closer to more of the soft dramatic type of lines. And I think that is really interesting. Now let's move on. You're not a dramatic classic if you have very contrasting facial features or have very delicate bone structure. If you have narrow and straight hips, which is interesting because you can look narrow when you lose weight. A lot of weight is a dramatic classic, but I think I know what they're talking about. Or if you are petite. And for some celebrity examples, I'm trying to see if we have anyone that is of color. Felicia, is it Felicia? Felicia Rashad is a woman of color, or a black woman. And so in true fashion of Thembi's view, I'm going to go ahead and give some comparisons between or among a dramatic classic, a dramatic, a soft dramatic, and a soft classic. Because I think that these are the three body types that the dramatic classic is more likely to be confused with. And so for my first comparison, I think I'm going to go ahead and use Yara Rashidi, I think. Is it Rashidi? I hope I'm not pronouncing her name wrong. I'll put it up here on the screen and I'll just say Yara from now on, moving forward, because I don't want to butcher her name. So she's going to be our dramatic classic example, and I'm going to go ahead and compare her to both a dramatic and a soft classic. So let's go ahead and get started with a dramatic. For my dramatic, I am thinking about using Ducky Thought because she definitely has facial features that are a lot softer than most dramatics. And so I think that she'd make a really good candidate for my comparisons. So now let's go ahead and look at Yara's face. Just like I mentioned earlier, her face is quite balanced. Of course, there's a mix of features. She definitely has a pretty balanced mix of sharp and softer features. She has softer lips, high cheekbones. They're quite soft as well. She definitely has that square jawline as well. More of a square face, in my opinion. But overall, she looks really balanced. So her flesh to me isn't as extreme. She doesn't seem like she's extremely lush. I wouldn't consider her as somebody who's really, really lush, but more so just somebody who is quite balanced. And so when you compare her to Ducky Thought's facial features, Ducky is a dramatic in my opinion. But I will say that even though her features are quite sharp, they're not as sharp as the typical dramatic facial features. She has softness in her lips as well. Her lips are quite lush. She also has a little bit of cheekbones here, but then of course you can tell the difference in their flesh is that Ducky to me has really lean flesh. So it's quite dry and it doesn't just look plush to me in a sense. Like it's not necessarily pinchable in a sense, for lack of better terms. And that is one of the differences that I can definitely depict in these images. She's a lot sharper overall. Of course, she's got that sharp nose like Yara does, or the skinnier nose like Yara does. And then she's got the straight eyes as well. Yara's eyes are a little bit larger in my opinion. And that is the comparison between their facial features. And now let's move on to their bodies. When it comes to their bodies, it's very, very evident that these two do not share a body type. Ducky is really elongated. Her limbs are very lean. She's got really dry flesh as well. And in dry, I mean that it doesn't come off really soft or lush. Even though she may look softer, let's say if she gained weight, her flesh in itself doesn't look like it's flesh that falls on a softer type, for instance, like a soft dramatic or a soft natural. And when you look at Yara, she doesn't look elongated to me. I see a lot of balance, and actually sometimes with Yara, I do kind of feel like she's a little bit on the shorter side, but or rather I would say she's moderate. She's not too short in my opinion. She's quite moderate, and you can definitely see that in her bone structure. She doesn't really have that long vertical line like Ducky Thought has. And then she definitely has a little bit of flesh here and there, a little bit in her bust line, a little bit of hips, but overall her frame is pretty balanced. Yes, I can see the sharpness in her shoulders, and they also look quite square as well. But all in all, she's very, very balanced. And then when you take a look at Yara and compare her to soft classic, for my soft classic, I'm thinking about using Ryan Destiny because I think that she would be a really good example of a soft classic in my opinion. For Ryan, you can definitely see the softness in her facial features, and I think it's because of her romantic essence and possibly ingenue essence as well. Her lips are a lot more lush. Her eyes are a larger almond-shaped eye. She has really soft cheeks as well, and she looks a lot lusher than Yara in my opinion. And when it comes to their bodies, the same thing. I am seeing a lot more softness on Ryan than I am on Yara. Ryan has more of waist definition or emphasis. You can see the difference in her hip to waist ratio, and you can definitely see more of that soft flesh. Even though Ryan doesn't really have a larger bust line, she just looks a lot softer. And of course, their similarity is that they are both balanced, and so you can definitely see the balance in their frame as well as in their height. And now let's move on to our comparison between a dramatic classic and a soft dramatic. For my dramatic classic, I'm going to move on to Miss Alicia Keys. And the reason I'm picking her is because Alicia Keys. Alicia. Oh my gosh, what is up with my tongue today? Alicia has a lot of hips, and I think she's more, I wouldn't say she's kind of on the heavier side of the dramatic classics, and so you can definitely see a lot more softness in her bones, on her body. And so I will compare her to a soft dramatic, and the beautiful soft dramatic I'm going to be using to compare her to is Justine Skye. Now, Justine Skye is quite skinny, and that's why I decided to compare her to Alicia Keys, just so you can see some of the similarities and differences a lot clearer. When it comes to Alicia's face, Alicia looks very, very balanced. Nothing is really standing out too much. Of course, there is a bit of sharpness when it comes to her nose. She has a pretty pointy nose, and then her eyes also are quite somewhat like straight, but a little bit more of like a straightish kind of angled eye, or let's just call them almond shaped. And she also has, when I look at her cheeks look slightly soft, but overall there's nothing too prominent or extreme on her faces, in my opinion. She just looks really, really balanced with some slight sharpness rather. And then when you look at Justine Skye, even though she's on the skinnier side, you can definitely see that lushness, not only in her cheeks, but in her lips as well. Her eyes are quite large and almond shaped as well. And she gives off a very powerful as well as mysterious vibe, in my opinion. Alicia is more of, I would say, she kind of comes off a little bit more polished and has a little bit of drama to her, but she's pretty classic in her essence, in my opinion. And then when it comes to their bodies, of course you can see that Alicia is quite soft. Her flesh is quite soft as well. It's not as soft as a soft classic, in my opinion, but she does have that pear shape, so the really thick flesh, especially on her thighs and on her legs. But at the same time, her bust line has stayed pretty small, so even though she has gained weight, she doesn't necessarily have a larger bust line in comparison to, let's say, soft dramatic, if a soft dramatic were to gain weight. And so the same thing with Justine Skye. She is very soft, quite lush. She has a pretty long vertical line, and she would be considered a tall hourglass, but more on the slender side. You can definitely see the definition in her waist, and she has that waist to hip to waist ratio as well, is pretty evident, as well as her bust line. She has a pretty prominent bust line, but it's more on the smaller side because she's skinny. But you can definitely see that Justine, to me, looks a lot more lusher and looks more like a larger woman, in my opinion, compared to Alicia Keys. Alicia Keys just comes off really moderate, but Justine is just on the larger side, and she's a lot more soft and lush and just really mysterious, and just, you know, she's a diva, so to speak. So I hope that makes sense. Now let's go ahead and continue. I need to give you the dramatic classic dressing lines. They need to be sharp, tailored, and straight. Okay, so like I mentioned, more like the dramatic. Classic and timeless shapes look great on you, as well as structured silhouettes. Square and V-neck lines, high quality fabrics that aren't too lightweight or too heavy, neutrals and deep colors with high color contrast in your outfits. For fabrics and materials, we're looking at high quality fabrics that keep their shape, moderate materials, classic prints, and then shapes and overall outfits need to be tailored cuts, waist definition, symmetric garments as well. For tops, you're going to look good in turtlenecks, tailored blouses, V necklines, asymmetric pieces, and angular clean cuts as well. Sharp and squared necklines are going to look amazing on you as well. For bottoms, we're looking at simple and tailored, clean and sleek, elegant, straight leg. So very, very similar to the dramatic, but not as sharp or structured as the dramatic. For skirts, we're looking at straight, narrow, slits below the knee length. So these are just recommendations. This doesn't mean that you can't experiment with your fashion. For dresses, we're looking at sleek and tailored, coat dresses, sculpted shoulders, optical focus on the shoulder, moderate length as well. Sweaters, lightweight knits, thin rib knits, slightly long cardigans with shape. For outerwear, we're looking at jackets, and they should be crisp and tailored. Double-breasted, sharper shoulders, longer length, cropped, streamlined jackets. And then, of course, for your hair and makeup and accessories, I would recommend that you look at your essences for this, because they tend to give a better picture of what suits you when it comes to things like that. So to end this video, I'm going to go ahead and give you a comparison, or some comparisons between 2 or 3 dramatic classics if I can find some. And I think I'm going to be using, who am I thinking? Let's go with Yara again, and then let's also go with Eve. Let's go with Alicia Keys, because I think I can find video. It's going to be easier for me to find a video of Alicia Keys than it will be for me to find one of Eve. And then I'm also going to, who else can I use? And for my 3rd dramatic classic, I'm thinking about showcasing Miss Zoe Saldana. And so when you look at these 3 women, I think they're quite different in how they appear. They're pretty diverse, and I believe that they definitely are giving us a good variation of what dramatic classics can look like. So with Miss Zoe, she is very skinny, and she is quite elongated as well, but not extremely so. She is balanced. And when you look at Miss Alicia Keys, of course, for her, she's a little bit on the softer side, or a lot more on the softer side. And I kind of feel like Yara is in the middle. But when you take a look at their movements, they kind of have this grace about them. And also this, I guess I wouldn't necessarily call it mystery, but it's just kind of, almost like a respectability when it comes to how they move. They're poised, they're quite poised in their movements, but then at the same time, they're also a little bit more relaxed. So it's a really good balance of being approachable, but also being regal at the same time. So I kind of feel like that is the essence of the dramatic classic. You can definitely see their regality in their movements, and just how poised and polished they look, and how they carry themselves as well. And I think that that is really fantastic when it comes to being able to look at people who belong to the same body type, and how they compare and even differ in their movements and in their essence and personas as well. But I find it so interesting when you can definitely see similarities. I think it's amazing how God created us to not only be unique, but to also be similar at the same time. I think that that is super cool. So anyway, we've now come to the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. We are going to be moving on to the final video of the KIBBE body type system, and that is the flamboyant gamine. I am so excited, and I also wanted to go ahead and put this out there. I would like you to start leaving names of influencers or celebrities that you'd like me to showcase in future videos. So basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to type them, and I'm also going to talk about their essences, and we're going to look at their clothing, what works and maybe what doesn't work, just so you can have more or less a personal way of looking at these style systems and even getting to learn how to use them yourself. So if you're interested in that, make sure that you leave the names of your favorite influencer or your favorite celebrity, and I'd be more than happy to showcase them in my new series. And hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll be able to start sharing my services as well in the near future, and I'm excited about that. And it's all thanks to all of you for being so supportive. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you all in the next one. God bless. Bye everyone.